Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Gesha Village Lot 24080 Natural Processed Ethiopia from the Picky Chemist. And there's the bag right there. And the Picky Chemist, based out of Chaudfontaine, Belgium. And they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel on numerous occasions, including our recent review of the Alaska del Sur, a wash-processed Ecuadorian coffee. And in that review, I mentioned that we finally got our hands on the Picky Chemist's Gesha Village coffees, which are some of the most highly acclaimed and sought-after coffees year after year. In fact, all three of these coffees that we're reviewing from the Picky Chemist sold out in about 10 minutes. So I do feel very fortunate that we got our hands on these coffees, and I'm definitely looking forward to discussing them, as this right here is day 56. And we definitely did push this one a fair bit, as the recipe we opted for this coffee was a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 99 degrees Celsius, about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I actually like this one best through the Chemex, which typically indicates a more medium grind. However, we went a little bit more fine on that grind as well. In fact, a couple notches more fine, as a matter of fact. Now, roast profile for this coffee, honestly, I originally thought that this one was technically an omni roast of this coffee, because when they sold it, I think that they only offered this one specifically in one profile. But as I'm looking at the bag, they do have this listed as a filter roast. Regardless, even with the processing, once again, this is the Picky Chemist, so we're working with some of the lightest roasted coffees out there in the entire world. So this one right here is definitely still an extremely light coffee by most standards and metrics, regardless of whether or not it's filter or omni roasted. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 29, first impression. And once again, probably started this coffee a little bit earlier than a lot of other people, but it wasn't quite as clean as initially expected, as it did offer a slight bit of fermentiness and graininess right from the onset. However, it was balanced out by a nice level of intensity in the red fruit scents and even a slightly darker berry aspect as well. Plenty of the listed orange intensity lending itself towards a pretty decent first impression, though truth be told, slightly mixed. Day 32 through the Chemex, and the cup has already improved as there's better definition to the red fruit aspects in a cleaner and sweeter sense. There's still a slight bit of the graininess and fermentiness in the cup, but they're relatively low as the candied aspects are a little bit more pronounced in the finish yet again. Day 35 through the April brewer, and it's improved slightly yet again as there's a slight bit more clarity to the cup, notably less graininess and fermentiness, allowing for better definition to the red fruit qualities, lending itself towards a much better third impression. And I did want to kind of speed run through those first couple of days, because here's where the coffee really started to change and really started to improve, as on day 38 we opted for the V60 with higher temperatures and a more fine grind, and it was definitely the best that had been up to this point. Red fruit qualities have some really nice definition to them, especially in the berry scents, with an abundance of the listed strawberry and raspberry tones. Significantly cleaner, as well as there's notably less of the heaviness and a much better cup in general. And it was kind of interesting to me, because those first couple of experiences kind of led me towards believing, you know what, maybe this coffee might not necessarily live up to a lot of the expectations I have for it. And truth be told, when I purchased this coffee, I kind of looked at the description profile of it and I said, I don't really know if I'm going to enjoy this coffee, because I've said in the past that when it comes to a lot of the more red fruit forward tones, especially in more processed coffees, I am a little bit more hesitant these days, mostly because I've been burned and haven't had the best experiences with them a lot within the last couple of years. But given that those first three impressions weren't necessarily lending itself towards the best impression, it did start to skew a lot better on this day going forward, as on day 41, once again, we went through the same adjustments, and there was greater clarity, sweetness, and definition all around, seemingly reminiscent of what I would describe at this time as being a red Jolly Rancher, slightly herbal in terms of the floral aspects and a darker sense as well, but really nice clarity all around. So I definitely saw a notable improvement each time I was brewing this coffee. Day 44 through the V60, and pushed the coffee a little bit harder, so I went a little bit more fine on the grind and lowered the concentration all the way down to a 17:1. And I feel like perhaps I pushed this one a slight bit too far, as there was a little bit more graininess again, and those middle 2 days I didn't experience any of it. So I feel like I kind of found the sweet spot and point I wanted this coffee to be, because it didn't offer a lot of fermentiness or graininess. In fact, it was much cleaner than I would expect for a natural processed coffee, even with the very light profile and even with it being a Gesha. I didn't necessarily expect that level of clarity. So kind of going back on that with this day 44 impression, I decided that maybe it was a little bit too much in that sense. It still does have that lovely red Jolly Rancher-like feel with the floral herbality yet again, but a slight bit more heaviness than I was hoping for. Day 47 to the Chemex with our day 41 recipe, and it was back to the best it had been, as it does offer plenty of the cleaner red berry aspects in a candied sense. It remains mostly cleaner in terms of the strawberry forward profile with a slight bit of tartness, but primarily sweetness with the other red berry characteristics as well. And on day 51, final notes we have through the Chemex with the same previous adjustments, and there's plenty of the listed raspberry in the aroma. And that's a little bit of a kind of cautionary point for me, because usually when I experience that much of a raspberry-like tone in the aroma of the coffee itself, it usually ends up being a little bit too heavy. But so interestingly to me, this coffee does come out sweeter and well-defined in terms of the strawberry red fruit aspect in the cup itself, which definitely helped. They do have a wild strawberry note listed on here, and it's so interesting to me just how concerning all of the notes that they had listed on this coffee were for me going into it, but how much those were quickly alleviated every time I would actually drink this coffee, mostly because of how clean it turned out to be. Definitely well above average in terms of the definition of this coffee, as there's an abundance of candied sweetness as well, definitely lending itself towards a very positive experience. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have 2 level 5s, so let's go through those real quick. And we'll start with the sweetness, level 5. And I have to say that at times I was kind of thinking on this, I'm like, does it justify a level 5? And then towards the end, I'm like, you know what, this coffee is just so sweet in terms of the fruit aspects that oftentimes when it comes to more processed coffees, the sweetness at a level 5 isn't necessarily a good thing because it's not matched by a really nice level of clarity. This one, on the other hand, actually justified that level 5 sweetness while still being balanced in the rest of the cup. So I'm very happy with this one scoring the level 5, especially given that it came in a cleaner fruit sense, as that's the other part that we must discuss within this level 5, and that is the berry fruit at a level 5. And once again, I feel like the notes that they had listed on here for this coffee, once again, wild strawberry and raspberry, and of course I'm going to memorize and remember those mostly because of just how prominent and abundant they were in this coffee throughout the entirety of it. Most specifically, the definition to the strawberry aspect is, I will continue to harp on the fact that anytime I see a strawberry note, especially when it comes to a natural processed coffee, mostly Colombians and a lot of Central and South American coffees, I do get a little concerned that they're going to end up being a little bit more heavy than I would like. Even when it comes to Ethiopian coffees, I still have that same level of concern. But this one right here was more than justified in scoring that level 5 while still offering really nice clarity. So I'm happy it reached that level 5, and that is entirely due to the cleanliness being at the level 4. So let's go ahead and discuss that real quick, because I feel like the first couple of impressions I said, oh no, it's going to score a level 3, and I'm not going to be happy with it scoring a level 3 because that's probably not going to lend itself towards the best review. But just a little bit of tinkering, a little bit of adjustments definitely lent this one towards being a much cleaner coffee. And there's an argument to be made that it wasn't even necessarily the adjustments we made, but rather letting this coffee settle a little bit more, as day 29 was a little early to start this coffee. But from that point going forward, it was very clean, especially for what this coffee was. So I'm very happy with that scoring a level 4 because it's more than justified. And if you're asking why it doesn't score that level 5, then I think it's because, as we've kind of mentioned, at times there's a slightly grainy quality, at times there's a slightly fermented quality, which I fully expect for a lot of coffees that do have a lot of those red fruit notes. But once again, for the most part, it was cleaner, well above average in terms of cleanliness and really nice definition. So if anything, it's actually on the higher side of level 4 in terms of the cleanliness. Finish, level 4, and I really like the finish of this coffee. It comes in a candied sense, so I'm very happy with that as I continue to kind of focus on the red Jolly Rancher note. So I could see like a strawberry Jolly Rancher, if there's a raspberry Jolly Rancher, just that red tone to this coffee, but in a much more candied sweet sense, which made me very happy with this one. Florality, level 4, and I think that goes along the lines of the very strong red tone to this coffee, as I could see plenty of floral aspects in that regard as well. And given that there's a slight herbal tone to it, though definitely still secondary to the very notable fruit components within this coffee, I feel like it had to justify itself scoring a little higher at that level 4 mark as well. Citrus fruit, level 4. And I think they have something along the lines of a candied orange list on here. Regardless, given that this coffee did have a candied theme to it throughout, and it was coming out a little bit sweeter in the citric tones as well, I was very happy with it scoring at that level 4 mark too, as it gave the fruit profiles a little bit more depth to it as well. Then we have a couple of level 3s. We'll start with the acidity level 3. And it's kind of interesting. Even pushing this coffee as much as we did, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was the most bright or acidic coffee out there. So that's been a little bit on par with some of the experiences I've had from the Picky Chemist's coffees. So interesting in that sense. Caramel level 3, that's entirely the candied aspect of this coffee. There's not really any sort of caramel note, but I wanted to kind of highlight the candied tone of this one somewhere, and that was the best place to put it. And then the final thing worth discussing is the body out of level 2, as this one was lighter bodied. And I was thinking on this, is it maybe a result of brewing this one with the Chemex? But I honestly think that this coffee was just meant to be a little lighter bodied in general. But as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. Let me start with this. I can definitely see why people rave about this coffee so much, and that is because the cleanliness and definition to it was tremendous. So massive credit to the Picky Chemist for that. And as far as I'm thinking in terms of the Picky Chemist coffees that we've reviewed, this one is probably my favorite. But I've kind of said that in the past when it comes to the Picky Chemist coffees. I actually prefer their natural processed coffees to their wash processed coffees, which is extremely rare for most coffee roasters these days. So I do want to give them massive credit to continuing to churn out these very nice and cleaner natural processed coffees in general. And this one was a testament to that because once again, the red fruit themes within this coffee were very scary and off-putting when initially purchasing this coffee. I just went and purchased this coffee without looking at the description though, because I knew I needed to review these Gesha Village coffees. And kind of seeing what I purchased, I went, I wonder if this is going to turn out better than I'm expecting, and it certainly did. So once again, massive credit to them and the producers on this coffee because I found this one to be a very enjoyable one and definitely my favorite Picky Chemist coffee that we've had up to this point. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. Let's go directly in terms of the red fruit tones because that one was the most abundant, prominent, and pronounced theme throughout the entirety of this coffee, and it definitely came in a cleaner sense. So for somebody like myself that very much enjoys fruit profiles in coffees but still needs them to be on the cleaner side of things, this one hit that mark in spades while still offering such tremendous level of sweetness and at no point becoming overbearing because even when it wasn't necessarily the cleanest, I wouldn't say that it was overbearing in any sense. The sweetness scoring at the level 5, while the finish scoring at that level 4 just kind of goes to show that it didn't reach that point where it's overbearing, and the cleanliness still remaining very high also does play a factor in that, as this coffee just seems very well constructed and very well defined for what it is. That's the best direction I can point somebody towards for this one, and the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Gesha Village Lot 24080, natural processed Ethiopia from the Picky Chemist. Thank you for watching.